people, welcome to Have Guitar Will Travel, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine. With your host, me, James Patrick Regan, otherwise known as Jimmy from the Deadlies. And today I'm speaking with guitarist Mike Clark from the Los Angeles progressive rock band Final Gravity. In our conversation, Mike talks briefly about the fires in the Pacific Palisades, which were close to him living in Santa Monica, and unfortunately, while preparing to evacuate, his car was broken into and his PRS guitar was stolen. Mike discusses the band's new album, Stormchaser, and the gear used to record it. Mike talks about growing up in Southern California and going to GIT at Cal State Northridge, studying jazz at GIT and classical guitar at Northridge. Mike talks about studying with guitarist Gary Hoey, and Mike tells us about his gear throughout the years and what the music stores in the greater LA area were like in the 90s. Mike talks about the challenges of booking shows in the Southern California area with a lot of pay to play. Mike discusses the future of the band and what lies ahead for them. Mike talks a bit about his day job and how he supports his musical habit, and he discusses beer, another one of his passions. Final Gravity is active on the socials, and they have a Bandcamp page. finalgravity.bandcamp.com. That's finalgravity.bandcamp.com. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and most of all, review this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And please support Vintage Guitar Magazine and all the wonderful things they do for us guitar players, because guess what? They do so many wonderful things for us guitar players. Here's my buddy Mike. Hey there, Mike.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm pretty good.
Good. How's life treating you?
It's going okay. How about you?
Where are you located in the grand scheme of things?
I'm out in the LA area. I actually live in the city of Santa Monica, which is actually right by where one of the big fires happened.
Sure.
So, luckily, wasn't too adversely affected by it, but pretty close.
Yeah. It certainly would put a damper on any kind of band activities that you have.
Yeah, we've managed to get together one time, but our drummer has a recording studio down in Torrance, which is pretty far south of any of the fires, so, pretty safe to head south to go down there.
Yeah, that's good. Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So you have a new album coming out, your band Final Gravity, that is.
Yep.
And it's called Stormchaser, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we're technically calling it an EP. It's probably about 35 minutes long, so in the 70s we would have called that an album. So it's got 6 tracks on it, 5 of them are original, and then we have like a Rush cover as the second to last track on it.
Oh, right on. The types of guitars that you're playing, I saw pictures of you holding everything from an ES355 to an acoustic, a Gibson acoustic, to James Tyler guitars. What are you playing on the album?
So the ES and the Gibson acoustic were both owned by our producer Rich Mauser.
Okay.
And unfortunately, Rich was affected by the fire, and I believe those guitars were probably lost.
Oh, that's terrible.
Along with his studio and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's got a GoFundMe going, and we're definitely contributing to it to help kind of get him back on his feet again.
Yeah.
We had those. I played for the James Tylers, I got a couple of Variax guitars. Those are more for live. They're modeling guitars, so they have a bunch of different Strats and Les Pauls, and
Sure.
Semi-hollows, full hollows, you name it. So you got a sitar and a banjo in there.
Okay.
So the sounds are pretty good, but they're mainly for live, and because you can actually also do virtual tunings, because we have a few songs in drop D.
Okay.
And then acoustics, I've got a couple of Taylors. I've got a 414 CE 6-string acoustic, and I've got a 314 CE 12-string acoustic.
Okay.
Or acoustic electric, so play both of those. And then I've got a couple of guitars, electric guitars. Primarily played a Music Man John Petrucci model JP15.
Yeah.
And then I had a Paul Reed Smith Custom 24 that, unfortunately, one way that I was impacted by the fire was that I was pretty close to an evacuation zone.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of put a few things in my car, figuring if I had to make a quick getaway that, I could just run down there, take my go bag and go.
Yeah.
So I kind of foolishly left my Paul Reed Smith in the trunk, and I guess somebody cased it out and stole it.
No way.
So I'm pretty bummed about that.
Yeah, no kidding. That sucks. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. I mean, people taking advantage of people in their most vulnerable moments.
Yeah, I think the moral is never leave your gear in your car if you can avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So,
pretty good.
yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
I was born down in San Diego, California, which is a couple hours south of LA.
Yeah.
Moved up to LA when I was a kid. I was in the Culver City area when I was like in elementary school, then actually moved to Santa Monica, pretty close to where I am now.
Okay.
Went there kind of for the second half of elementary school, all the way through, like junior high, high school.
Wow.
So kind of, moved around a little bit within the California area between then and now. But yeah, I've been living back in Santa Monica for the last like 15 years.
Okay. What was Santa Monica like in the? I'm not sure what decade that would have been that you grew up there, but what was it like?
I grew up in the 80s out here, and it was very different. Santa Monica now is a very rich city, like huge property values, and just a lot of money came in the city. When I was growing up, it was really interesting because the northern part of the city, was a bunch of huge mansions, definitely a lot of, money up there, and, very wealthy people.
Sure.
And the farther south you went, the kind of more like, it'd almost go like, yuppies a little south of there, kind of upper middle class below that, a little bit more working class below that. So I went to Santa Monica High School, public school, and we had this whole mix of like, you might be one weekend going to a garage party and people living in a small house in the southern part of Santa Monica.
Yeah.
And then the next week you might be going to a huge mansion party up in Malibu because we had students up there too.
Wow.
So really interesting mix of kind of socioeconomic backgrounds and very, very, very diverse. And, this is a very cool kind of place to grow up.
Yeah. Were you playing music in high school?
Yeah. Started guitar when I was 14 and played in some bands throughout high school and, was taking like kind of formal guitar lessons back then with a couple of jazz-oriented guitar teachers, including a guy named Jeff Richman, who is, decently known in the kind of jazz guitar community.
Yeah.
Produced a lot of albums and, tours a fair amount. So it was great studying with him for a while.
Yeah, of course. And you went to GIT?
I did. That's where I met our bass player, Charles. So
okay.
He and I were both attending at the same time. Went there for a year before I kind of went back and finished up my bachelor's degree, which I did get in classical guitar performance. But
wow.
At Musicians Institute, I just kind of convinced my parents to let me do like one year kind of intensive music education before I went back to the college things. So really great because I was able to kind of study, very intensively, practice, many hours per day.
Yeah.
Ended up meeting Charles because he put up an ad for Guitarist Wanted, and he mentioned the bands Rush and King's X, who are, big influences on me.
Sure.
And even some big influences on our couple of songs on our current EP. Mm-hmm. So, we just kind of connected and started playing together, and we've been friends ever since then. Done, aside from Fun of Gravity, just numerous different musical projects.
Yeah. And so where did you get your classical performance degree?
Cal State University, Northridge.
Northridge, okay.
So, I went to CSUN, and, I went up there because it was really great public school for music education. I don't know if it's still there, but I think it was like ranked like top 25. So very, very, very affordable, but very great staff. And so I studied classical guitar, a little bit of composition, and, was really surrounded by a bunch of great musicians up there.
And do you play classical gigs as well?
I haven't played any gigs. I mean, I kind of dabble with it here and there, but really I kind of like, once I finished the degree, I was pretty focused on like kind of mainly on rock guitar.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So when you were going to GIT, anybody notable besides yourself there that was going there?
In terms of classmates, not that I'm really aware of. I mean, I think that one of the big things that I got out of it was obviously being able to see all these like world-class, players just performing in our main auditorium. But one of those was Gary Hoey,
sure,
who has done a bunch of different instrumental albums. So I ended up actually studying with Gary for a year after MI because of that. So it was basically I think at the end of that year is when Gary stopped teaching because he, at the start, he was in a band called Heavy Bones, and it was like Frankie Banali from Quiet Riot on drums, and him and a couple other guys. Yep. And then at the end, he did his first solo album, and the first solo album did pretty well, so he's pretty much like, well, I, getting too successful to keep doing teaching, but really great because, he definitely was, helping with my chops, my technique, but he was a very musical player, still is.
Yeah.
Very into like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but also into like kind of shred, hard rock and metal and everything.
Yeah.
So he gave me a really kind of just a broad, based like, again, improve my technique, improve my ear, improve my melodic playing. So really great year studying with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were growing up in the 80s, did you have an opportunity to see Rush or King's X or any of those bands?
Oh yeah, many times. First time I saw Rush was on the Grace Under Pressure tour at the Forum in LA.
Mm-hmm.
That was like 1984. Not too long after I started playing guitar. And then, yeah, I pretty much saw them on every tour, since then, between then and when they ended. So I saw them at the Forum about 3 times in a row because they came back for Power Windows in 86, I think.
Yeah.
And, yeah, then I actually saw them down in San Diego for the Hold Your Fire tour. And what's interesting, they have an album called A Show of Hands, and one of the performances on that album was at the show I attended in San Diego.
Oh, right on.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic.
So, yeah, I saw Rush a bunch of times. King's X, yeah, saw them a ton of times. Thrilled they're actually going to be coming back to LA to play like 3 shows coming up, and I'm going to try to go to all 3 of them.
Yeah.
But the first time I ever saw them, I think it was a club called Jezebel's, like a fairly small club down in Anaheim, California. And it was on their second album, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, which is like one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there are a couple of notable things about that show. One is that, it was an incredible show. It was like, they've always been great, but they're just in peak form and, vocally and musically.
Yeah.
It was also one of the loudest shows that I ever attended, to the point where I felt like my hearing actually cut out for about a second.
Oh, no.
It came back, but it was really, really loud. So worth it, though, because they're incredible.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Were your parents musical at all?
Not my parents. I mean, my dad was into some kind of, pretty good classic rock stuff, kind of rubbed off, like, Stones and Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles, stuff like that.
Yep.
My mom wasn't really musical, but her dad, or my grandfather, actually played cello. I mean, kind of just, more as a hobby.
Yeah.
But my uncle is, kind of a semi-professional cellist. And, so, I mean, he wasn't making his living doing it, but definitely getting out there and playing a lot of, like, chamber music and kind of ensemble type work and all that.
Sure.
So I think my uncle and my grandfather were both very musical, and then another uncle from that side of the family is a really good acoustic guitar player. So definitely had some influences from a couple of my uncles there.
Yeah. And are you an only child, or do you have siblings?
No, I have siblings. I have a sister 4 years younger than me, and then my parents got divorced and remarried, so I actually have three half sisters.
Okay. All right. And is your sister your full sister? Is she musical?
She sings, and including when she was a kid, but now she doesn't really play any instruments.
Okay. All right. And when you're growing up, what were you playing as far as gear back then?
Not the greatest gear. I think my first guitar was a brand called Hondo, which was not the greatest guitar. I think I had that about a year, and finally I think I upgraded to like a Squire Strat after that, which was a big leap up. Actually had like a Hamer. I forget the model number, but it was like a little, like, kind of almost like a Les Paul Jr. kind of copy.
Yes, exactly.
So that was a fun guitar. I had that for a while. And in terms of amps, I mean, when I first started, I just had like a little tiny Yamaha practice amp and run a couple of Boss pedals into it for distortion. And, in hindsight, it probably sounded terrible, but it was fun at the time. And then I had like just kind of after that, I got like I don't even remember the model. It's still like an old Fender, not a vintage Fender, but like just a kind of okay Fender, solid state amplifier.
Yeah, of course. And do you ever go to music stores like McCabe's? Isn't McCabe's in Santa Monica?
McCabe's still there. I didn't go to McCabe's as much back then. I was always going to, there's a store called West LA Music, not too far from Santa Monica.
Sure.
And they were pretty cool about letting people loiter in there and play all the instruments and everything. So I'd just go in there and, blow a bunch of time playing guitars and keyboards and whatever I could. Then, Guitar Center, especially the one out in Hollywood, has always been one of the better ones, like really big and, again, pretty cool for going in there and playing with stuff. So those are the big ones, but there were a bunch of other stores. There's actually a store in Santa Monica called Ace Music that had a bunch of used gear, and that was almost like a little hangout for me and my friends, where we got to know the people so much there that one of the employees actually convinced a couple of us, teenage kids, to go and roadie for their band. So they're like, basically getting free road crew for, in exchange for like an illicit 12-pack of light beer here and there.
Yeah. And now, are you mostly doing gigs with Final Gravity, or do you guys have other side projects apart from that?
At the moment, mainly Final Gravity. I was playing in a King Crimson tribute band for a while.
Right on.
We actually got together and tried to. It wasn't really a gig. It was more like an open rehearsal, but we didn't really have much time to prepare. And the problem with King Crimson is you got to be prepared.
Yes.
So, hoping that at some point we can actually all devote enough time to get out and do a proper gig. But we were doing that sporadically. And then I guess one other thing I'm trying to do is like bring back a little bit of the jazz playing. Like when I was studying with Jeff Richmond, I definitely got a lot of jazz, in terms of like, chord and, a little bit of playing over changes, but was never really happy with how good I got at playing jazz. So I actually went out and bought like just a Yamaha semi-hollow, Ibanez semi-hollow body a few months ago. And I've been trying to kind of, work on my jazz playing. So probably not going to be brave enough to get out and play any jazz live for a while, but maybe toward the end of the year, early next year, hopefully it'll be
cool.
Take that leap.
So how hard is it to get gigs? I mean, LA is a big place, but there's also a buttload of bands. So how hard is it to get gigs for your band? I noticed that you guys are doing a lot of opening for name acts. Like, how hard is that? How do you guys go about getting those gigs?
Well, the problem with LA, and it's been this way for a long time, is that a lot of these gigs are, kind of like pay to play.
Okay.
So, like, for example, we opened for Zebra at the Whiskey Go-Go, like in 2023. And it was a great show. I'm glad we did it, but we actually had to, you have to buy tickets in advance for that, and you have to, you can make your money back if you sell them all, but sometimes it can be a pretty substantial upfront outlay on it.
Yeah, yep.
And it can be hard to kind of sustain that and play a bunch of gigs that way.
Yeah.
Because you try to rope up all your, all your friends to go, hey, I need to sell a bunch of tickets so you can come out. We actually played a gig in November up in Palmdale at Transplants Brewery, and that was like cool because I was actually friends of ours started the brewery. Actually, based on our bass player Charles got really into beer a while ago, partly because of my influence.
Okay.
And he had some neighbors who he got into beer, and they got so into it they founded this brewery. So we play up there periodically, and they have a really nice like performance venue, and we actually played in a bill where they had like Vinnie Moore and Tony McAlpine playing in the bill.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a little intimidating, but glad we did it.
Oh yeah, of course. Apart from the pay to play stuff and the tap room stuff, where else do you guys play?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we have not done a ton of gigs lately. We actually did one down in Corona, California, back in actually a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And that was actually not a pay-to-play gig, so that was cool. So we're trying to form more like that, where it's like maybe getting on a bill where, they have more, of a regular crowd, so we can get out in front of like new people and not have to always be laying out a bunch of money up front.
Yes.
Nor trekking, really, really far for all these gigs. So I think we're going to try to make that Palmdale one recurring if we're, if the owners are open to it, because, it seemed to go over well, and, it's worth a trek every few months. But if we can kind of sprinkle that in with other gigs where we're not having to, do the pay-to-play thing, and we can strategically do a pay-to-play every now and then, but we just want to kind of spread them out.
And getting to Palmdale from Santa Monica on a Friday afternoon, trying to play a gig Friday night. What time do you have to leave?
Yeah, I mean, typically for a thing like that, you'd probably have to leave 2 hours ahead of time. So, if you have like if you have a 6 p.m. load in, you're probably gonna have to leave at 4 to make sure you get there on time.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's
that could be worse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you have the new album out, and you're pushing it pretty hard, obviously. What lies ahead? What lies after this?
Well, one of the things with the Stormchaser is that we'd originally kind of planned it to be taking a bunch of our kind of older unfinished material and kind of getting it to a point where we could release it, and then kind of focusing on like writing all new material after that, or higher proportion new material. So we actually, the closing track on the EP is called Planet Earth, and it's a thing that I actually wrote quite a while ago. And John, our drummer, had the idea of like, he brought in an engineer friend of his, Chris Henry, and Chris ended up kind of just basically engineering us and sort of, producing our performances for a day in John's studio. And most of the tracks that you heard on that were from that session. And then, we kind of thought, well, we should probably put this out there. And that kind of started the ball rolling of like, well, we thought, who do we want to have mix it? And that's how we kind of ended up with Rich Mausers, that he produced some friends of ours. And I later figured out that he actually produced some of my favorite, like, progressive rock kind of side project albums, like Transatlantic, for example. Anyway, so... yeah, we kind of decided, okay, well, we're going to put out Planet Earth, and then we had the idea of doing the EP, and we thought, well, Planet Earth is kind of older, so let's gather up a few other songs. So the song Automatic Pilot, which is the third song on the album, that was another one we demoed out a while ago. And then we have, like, the fourth song is Story of Forever, which is, like, started off as a garage jam, and we always kind of played around with this, like, riff on there. And then we had our second track, which is called Far Away Now, but it used to be called Velvet Wall Prison. So those were the ones that we'd originally planned to put on the EP. But we took them all to Rich, and basically he wanted to kind of do like pre-production on all this stuff to kind of like arrange them and everything, and worked with us a lot to kind of, refine, streamline, rearrange things. But we wanted to do one more song, and we actually played him another older song that we'd actually performed at that whiskey gig as sort of a warm-up for doing this EP. And Rich is like, nah, I don't really like it. What else you got? And so we played him one of our newer songs, which is the opening track, the one called The Deep. And so Rich worked with us on that, and again, streamlined it, and was probably like an 8-minute song with a bunch of parts, and kind of brought it down to a more reasonable length and made it more kind of tight. So it was primarily intended to be just kind of, clear the decks and make way for, new music. But one of those tracks did end up being the opener, and we're glad it's on there. But next step is, I think we're going to try to like mainly focus on, new stuff, because we've kind of, again, put out a lot of our unfinished material that we, had been sitting there. Yeah.
And outside of music, what do you do? What do you do for fun, or how do you finance your musical habit?
Well, what I do for financing my musical habit is I'm actually a data engineer, data architect, which I've been doing for a long time. Actually worked for the company Ring, which is a part of Amazon. So I've been working with Amazon for a few years. So it's been nice in terms of, being able to have, nice little source of funding for, for our endeavors and all that. Be able to afford the occasional pay-to-play show.
Yeah, exactly.
For fun, I don't know, mainly like to kind of, hang out with my wife and son.
And you like beer?
My son and I, I love craft beer. Love traveling. Especially, especially fun when I travel, because two things that are really interesting when traveling is looking at the beer scene, because, different parts of the world have very different beer, but looking at how different countries, when I travel internationally, their attitude toward music, like, rock, jazz, etc. Like my wife, my son, and I, along with our brother and sister-in-law, traveled over to Japan in the last summer.
Right on.
And it was really cool. We were in Tokyo for half the time, and then down like kind of Osaka, Kyoto area the other half of the time. But their whole vibe toward music is totally different than here. Like we actually got tickets to go to a show at the Blue Note Tokyo. And it was Mike Stern on guitar, and Dennis Chambers on drums, and a couple other guys we've been playing with for a long time. And this is like a Monday night in Tokyo, non-holiday, the earlier show, like 6 p.m., and it was almost sold out. It was like, you had all these, like, almost entirely Japanese people sitting there, like, just paying complete attention and really getting really into the music and all that. And just, in general, it's like you get over and travel there, it's like, all kinds of record shops, all kinds of physical media still out there. Just a very, it reminds me of things I used to be here. It's just, so that's one thing I really enjoy, is traveling and kind of seeing those differences from different parts of the country and different parts of the world.
Did you have a chance to go to the guitar shop district in Tokyo?
I went by it and intended to go there, but because we were traveling with a fairly large group, it sort of didn't end up working out. But I'm planning to go back to Japan in the next couple of years, so we'll absolutely head over there.
And what are some craft beers that people need to try out that you've tasted?
Well, probably my favorite craft beer of all time is brewery Russian River Brewing out here in California. They're up in the Santa Rosa area up north. So they have a beer called Planted the Elder, which is like basically kind of considered the first one of the first double IPAs out there.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though it's a pretty strong, high alcohol beer, it's always been really kind of clean and smooth. And, it's bitter, but it's very drinkable.
Yeah.
So that's probably the go-to. And then I think for a more widely available beer, and actually one of the first beers that got me into beer is Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Sure.
I mean, it's been around forever, but it's just a great beer and almost underappreciated because for a long time I think everyone was deviating toward more extreme flavors, but Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is still a great beer to try.
Yeah, right on. Well, thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Yeah, and I hope I run into you in person here pretty soon, someday.
Yeah, you going to NAMM?
I'll be at NAMM, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm going to go down there. So, if I make it down there, I'll, maybe we can hook up and meet in person.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. You too. Bye.
All right, bye.
Thanks for listening to Have Guitar Will Travel. You can catch up on all the things I'm doing at thedeadlies.com, and I'm on all the social media platforms as well. And please support Vintage Guitar and all the wonderful things they do, because they do many, many wonderful things for us guitar players. Thanks. Please subscribe. Please tell a friend, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.